Oh, did we get it working? I think we got him. Well, bit of a rough start, but we are live. Had some microphone issues there at the start, not sure what's going on, but we've got two HomePods in for repair today. First one up here has got dirty bass, and the second one will have no power. So without further delay, let's go ahead and power up this HomePod here and get a brief glimpse at its current behavior. So we're going to let this boot up. I'm expecting after it boots up to hear sort of a popping sound after I wake it up, but let's see. Assuming they didn't already factory reset it. Alright, cool. So it's booted up. Let's wake up the amp.
I'm having trouble.
And I heard a slight pop. Not quite as loud as I would normally expect. But, so let's go ahead and unplug that from power. Alright. So what we're looking at here, get this power cable, there we go, disconnected. What we're looking at here is a HomePod that has dirty bass. In other words, whenever they're playing music on it, after some time, it will start to develop this like crackling sound. The bass starts to just sound weird, kind of like an extra unwanted layer on top of your music. And usually, why this occurs is a set of capacitors on the amplifier board tends to go bad and allow too much DC through the amplifier and pumped into the subwoofer. And this over time can cause issues like crackling, death farts, loud popping as it goes in and out of standby, that sort of thing. So we're going to tear apart this HomePod, and then we are going to put it together on the test bench so that way we can connect our multimeter to the subwoofer output on the amplifier. And what that lets us do is check exactly how much DC is being produced and sent into that woofer and causing our problems. We're going to be looking for two things when we take that DC measurement on the subwoofer output from the amplifier. We're looking to see how much DC is being produced and if that number is changing rapidly. So we are totally fine with anywhere between like 10 and 50 millivolts at most of DC coming into the subwoofer. That's totally fine. But if we see more than that, and or we see that DC number steadily increasing on our multimeter, then those are obviously signs that those capacitors on the amplifier are going bad. Pretty much every single case so far with the death farts, the popping, and the crackling in the bass have been attributed to these capacitors starting to go bad. So, like I said, let's go ahead and crack this one open and start doing some testing before we jump right into our repairs here. Now, since this one doesn't pop very loudly, I'm not expecting to see a whole lot of DC when we test this pod until we apply some heat to those capacitors that tend to go bad. Just as a good big fat note, the DC offset issue from those failing capacitors gets worse with heat. So it would make sense when you first power on your HomePod after it's been unplugged for a while, after it's cooled down, for the popping to be rather quiet. But after you use it for some time and it starts to warm up, that DC offset will grow. And it can grow to a point where it will trigger those death farts and crackling in the bass. If I recall correctly, it takes a couple of volts to trigger that death fart, but the death fart is actually it's either the amp or the DAC chip is detecting how much DC offset there is, and it's forcing a restart, which is that fart sound that you hear. Quite interesting. But so I guess the moral of that whole ramble there is the death fart sound is actually part of the programming of the amplifier. Like it's supposed to make that sound if it crashes and force restarts. I don't believe it comes from the logic board, but I think that actually comes from the amplifier IC or the DAC IC. One of those two, when I was reading, I can't remember which one of those two it was specifically, but I was reading the data sheet for one of those two chips, and it basically laid out that sort of death fart and force restart behavior, and I was like, huh, so that's why it farts. But anyways, let's get our nice little camera angle up here so you can see what I'm doing on the top here. I'm going to go ahead and unscrew these so we can pry this display out. These are just, every single screw in the HomePod is T6, and that's really cool. The only exception to that being the 3 screws under the rubber foot on the bottom, but for the majority of your repairs you don't need to take that off, so makes it a little easier. Gonna pry that display up, see how we're getting under both of those layers, both the PCB and the plastic, and not just that plastic layer. And then we're gonna slide a plastic tool in between that, set the metal one to the side, and use this plastic tool to pry this up. Prevents a bunch of scratching and tearing up the display PCB itself. And it feels like a little bit of that adhesive is really fighting to hold on to that display. There we go. We can get that disconnected. Set the display to the side. I'm going to go ahead and just put this adhesive back down now so we don't have to go back and do it later. Alright, that's good enough. Let's get this frame taken out now. Oh, and our beer of choice today is, found it at Walmart on clearance. Some pre-prohibition cream ale. Not exactly sure what that means, but it's pretty good. Alright, and then those screws for the drawstring, of course. And then we can pop those drawstrings out. Get that untangled so that we can start sliding the mesh down, which frees up our frame. So we can set that to the side. And then we can see our logic board, so we'll flip that up very carefully without pulling on this too much. Unlock that connector, and out she goes. Now if you notice, there's like teeth on these connectors. They don't just slide straight in like this. You gotta connect them at a bit of an angle, and then to disconnect them you also gotta kind of pull it away at a 45-degree angle from the cable. Actually, I've got another logic cable here somewhere. Would be much easier for me to demonstrate to you like this. So, as I said, whenever you're connecting or disconnecting this main logic cable from the logic board, the cable needs to go in at a 45-degree angle into the connector. and then you can lay it down flat, and then you can lock it. And then to unlock it, of course, flip the tab up, pull the cable up at a 45-ish degree angle, and you can pull it straight out. So not quite as straightforward as just slide it in and lock it down, but once you see it for yourself and start playing with it, you'll know what I'm talking about. So anyways, we are now going to grab our base, set our HomePod down on top of that, so that when we slide this mesh down, the mesh isn't pressing into the table, and this will help keep the mesh down here from sort of creasing as we work on it, especially for some of the harder steps where we gotta kind of like push and ream on it. Really bad for the mesh to be pressing up against the table directly, so you see I can actually stick my hand underneath all the way around this mesh. So that keeps this in good condition and it prevents it from being getting messed up. And I just use a roll of empty tape to set that on. It's the perfect size to where it sits on the rubber base, but the mesh can still go around it without pushing down on it. So anyways, let's go ahead and work on popping off this top basket here. And of course we'll need to start by removing these rubber pieces here that cover each of these screws. I'm disappointed in the poll results so far. Alright, and then we're going to take these screws out. I think I see some pretty gnarly physical damage here already. I'll show you guys once I get all these screws off. But I've got so many of these shells sitting around that I'm not going to charge them anything extra to replace this part that I see that's broken. At this point, I just want to get rid of some of these parts because I've got such an imbalance. You know, I'm short of logic cables and subwoofers, but I've got so many plastic shells and baskets and what have you, so I'll show you guys in just a sec. It actually looks really gnarly. I'll be surprised if we open this up when we don't find any other physical damage inside to any of the boards. I'm actually kind of surprised it worked. But if we spin this around a little bit and I pull the mesh down a little more, wow. Wow. That is something. I can't say I've ever seen that before. So I'm willing to bet this may be the source of their dirty base. So there's one of two possibilities going on here. Wow. So either this is how it was when they had it and they were using it, and obviously with such a big leak here in the shell, the base is going to sound horrendous. Or their base is dirty because of the DC offset from those bad caps, and when they shipped this, perhaps this happened during shipping. Not quite sure, because obviously they never took this apart, so I'm not sure if they would have ever known. Or heck, maybe because I think if I recall correctly, they said that they bought this used, so perhaps the previous owner had incorrectly shipped it to them. Or at some point while they owned it, it fell off a shelf, but who knows? Like I said, I've got more than enough of these shells sitting around. I don't have a problem replacing this and not charging anything extra. What we'll do is we'll take their subwoofer, their power supply, their amplifier, and we'll move those parts into another shell. And then, well, before we do that, we'll take this apart. We'll do the normal board repairs, just as preventative sort of maintenance, I guess. And then we'll move this to a new shell. So, wow. That is, there's a first time for everything, isn't there? Wow. Well, let's go ahead and do this. I'm going to slide this mesh back up. Not all the way because I want to flip this upside down and take off this, we're going to take their mesh and move it over to another shell. But just to make our lives a little easier, we'll go ahead and take this mesh off now. There we go. That went to the 9th dimension, as Northridge would say. And then we'll switch out our T6 bit here for a T5 bit so we can get those screws from underneath out. There's just 3 of them. Sometimes they like to hide underneath that adhesive, so sometimes you gotta scrape a little bit of it away. There we go. And then this will just slide right off. And those are the only T5 Torx screws in this entire pod, and that's how you swap your mesh. So we'll set this to the side. We will take another look at that physical damage here. Wow. That's going to be some good thumbnail content right there. But okay. So we don't have a mesh on this anymore. We don't have to worry about it, you know, sitting on our mesh and creasing it. So let's go on ahead and carry on with disassembly here. We're going to get our big fat flathead, and we're going to pry off what's left of this this basket here, I suppose. Wow. Incredible. I wonder if I can just... Nah, I can't quite reach it. I was hoping I was going to be able to just crack this open without tearing this up, but nope. So, want to welcome anybody who's recently joined our stream. Go ahead and show you really quick the extent of the physical damage we're dealing with here. Quite the hefty crack, most likely the cause of our dirty base. So we're going to go ahead and swap this into another shell. Not before we do some classic board repair on their amplifier. Just the usual preventative maintenance. But let's go ahead and pry this basket off so we can get a better look at our components inside. And hopefully none of those are physically damaged from this drop. Or this crack or whatever happened to it. Who knows? I've never seen the shell cracked like that before. Yeah, this thing does not want to give up without a fight, huh? Well, HomePods are no match for my big fat flathead. And my big meaty claws. Alright, we pried that up enough. Let's see if we can rip this, see if we can pry this basket off. There we go. Really putting up a fight. Wow. Alright, we got that off in one piece. Very good. So just to catch everybody up on what we've got going on here, we originally were approaching this thinking that we were going to fix some DC offset, you know, the usual amplifier board repairs on the inside, but once we got that mesh off, we noticed quite a significant crack in the shell, and I have no idea when this would have happened, if this happened during their ownership or if it happened during because I think they bought this used. So maybe the previous owner improperly shipped it to them, or perhaps it was damaged during transit to me. But unfortunately, since they never took it apart, I don't think we'll ever know when this damage occurred, because you can't see it until you get the mesh off. So, but obviously this is going to create a really huge problem with the seal and make your bass sound absolutely terrible. So what we're going to do is take all of their parts from the inside, you know, the woofer, the amp, power supply. We're going to move those over to another shell because I've got way too many of these shells than I've got any sort of usefulness for. And we'll do the usual board repairs just for preventative maintenance. And since we've already got it here and apart, and then we will put them into a new shell and see what we've got. I've never seen this kind of damage before, and I've seen my fair share of HomePods. I've bought my fair share of broken HomePods off eBay sellers, and I've seen some pretty wild damage, but nothing like this. I am thoroughly impressed. Well, on the bright side, at the very least, all of their parts that really matter are still working and in good condition. So that's good. Let's get that woofer out. And just taking a look at the condition of the voice coil in there. It looks nice and gold and copper color. Feels smooth when I gently push it in. Sniff test. Smells like a subwoofer. So, for all intents and purposes, it would appear that their woofer is in good condition. So don't need to worry about replacing that. Let's get, wow. This isn't even screwed all the way in. That's insane. I think we're gonna use different gaskets here too, because this is, as they called it in the military, 8 up. This is 8 the F up. Before we start reaming that, let's push this logic cable through so we don't damage it. Yeah, and that just came right out because, I mean, obviously there's no tension in here anymore. And this is broken. Wow. That is gnarly. Is this still good even? Nah, I'm not even gonna try. I've got plenty of these to replace that with. I'm not even gonna bother. But let's go on ahead and get some of the rest of these parts out. So first, this power supply. Oh boy. There we go. I was gonna say I don't want to replace another screw mount on the amplifier board. That would suck. But looks like all those screws for the power supply came out without a problem. So let's get the power supply yanked out of here. I'm just going to pull that straight up until it disconnects. And good. Set that to the side. And let's get that logic cable disconnected down there. Very good. Wow, I'm wondering if any of the tweeters are physically damaged too, because normally with such extreme drop damage like this, I've found that the tweeters, I've seen tweeters in the past cracked. Like the outside of the HomePod looked fine, but the inside, when you looked at the tweeters, their shell was cracked. Actually, I've got a few right here. And when you shake them, they're loose inside. So I'm curious if their tweeters are also damaged like this, due to the extent of that's gnarly. No, not Marley. Sit down, Marley. The tweeters cannot be repaired, but you can replace them. Yeah, so there's this plastic ring that holds all of them down. There's a couple of tabs. You can see one of them right here. But there's a couple of tabs around this plastic ring that you have to pry out. You also need to remove the microphone board and the logic cable here in order to unscrew this plastic retaining ring up enough in order to pull the tweeters out. And the tweeters are just held in by these 3 screws. So you can unscrew them, take out the cable, take out the mic board, and then you can pry the tabs on this retaining plastic ring here. Unscrew this counterclockwise and your tweeters are free. But yeah, this shell is no longer serviceable. That is just insane. I wonder if yeah, the tweeters sound like they weren't damaged, but I'm not going to trust any of the parts in here. We're just going to swap this shell entirely. Not trusting that. Now that we've got this amplifier out, we're going to, let's see here, what date code do we have on our diode? 1746K. So we're going to replace this power diode, and we're also going to replace the 4 capacitors back here. So that should take care of any future DC offset problems, any future no power problems, at least anytime in the foreseeable future. So, let's go ahead and situate ourselves. There's our diode. Gonna take a sip. All right. Without further ado, let's do some. Let's pull some parts. Alright, got that diode off. Let's go ahead and pull these capacitors off while the board is warm. Alright. And then let's grab a new set of components. We'll need a diode and those capacitors. So here's our diode. And we'll grab 4 new capacitors. And then we'll grab our soldering iron here. We're going to put some fresh flux onto these pads. Just get some fresh solder onto them before we put these new capacitors on. There we go. Ready for new components. Let's get our heat gun back out here. Start going to town. Does not want to stick well. Let's get some more flux on there. All right. Next one. All right, third one. And our last one. Alright, let's flip this around. Finish replacing that diode here. Put some fresh flux on there. Get some flux on our diode while we're at it. And let's put some fresh solder onto that diode here before we drop it on. Beautiful. We'll drop that into place. And we will heat that on down. Wait. Oh, it's trying to run away. We're just going to let the solder do its job here and suck it into place. And then we'll press that down. Wait for that to cool, just like that. All right. Got that board all fixed up. New diode, new caps. Let's find ourselves a replacement shell. Let's see here. Which one? This one looks pretty good. Don't see any physical damage on it. Alright, so in case you're just recently joining and catching up, we've got our first HomePod apart, and we found when we removed the mesh that there was a really gnarly, really gnarly crack in here. in the shell, which was most likely the source of their dirty bass. But just for kicks, we went ahead and replaced the power diode and the DC capacitors on the back, just for good measure. And we're going to go ahead and put all of their parts into a fresh, new, but not cracked, at least, shell. So, without further ado, let's just wipe off some of that excess flux on there. It's not going to hurt anything, but might as well get it if you can. Let's drop this in. And we can screw this amp back down. Yeah, come on. Come on. Yeah. Yeah. Last screw for the amplifier here. Cruising along. Alright, before we forget, let's reconnect that logic board cable to the amplifier down there. Do not want a repeat of our last stream. Really. Alright, and then we'll grab their power supply and drop that in. Plug that up. And screw it in. Alright, got that power supply in without a problem. Let's find ourselves, let's see here, gonna need some new rings here. So let's just grab some of those from my pile, from my stash. Here we go. So I don't necessarily trust, due to the extent of the damage here, not sure I want to trust their rings here, especially with this one being as damaged as it is. So we're going to replace those rings as well. And it's not like I'm in any shortage of these plastic parts here. I'm more than happy to swap all these out, just precautionary. I've got more than enough of them, and I'm not going to charge them anything extra to replace it. Alright. Oh god, I didn't even think of that. Don't want to know how the alleged new HomePods are. I hope parts aren't tied to the board. I didn't even think about that. Oh my gosh. So... shit. That would be so ridiculous. Get this, if they released the new HomePod, it uses parts that are backwards compatible physically with the old OG HomePods, but then they turn around and tie each part together by serial number and whatever that they, that fancy shit they do with the new iPhones. So you can't, even if you can physically reconnect them and reuse the parts, they block you from doing it. That would suck, absolutely. I'd never even thought of that. Alright, got new gaskets in here. Let's put this back on. Let's get the subwoofer put in. And don't forget that that gasket underneath it. There we go. Alright, let's go ahead and screw that in. Oh, let's get that side angle camera back up here. Yeah. We know you love it. Okay, woofers back in. Let's get their basket back here. Go ahead and line that up and drop her on down. And if we check all the way around that, it's nice and flush. It's not sticking up anywhere, and we haven't even put the screws in yet, so no interference with that crappy glue that they use. We can go ahead and screw that in without a problem. Alright. Screw the screws. All of them. I can't even. Let's just take another second to admire that damage. Wow. How? What's even funnier is it cracked right at the end of the mic cable here, so this microphone cable's still good. That's funny. But that is just annihilated. How? Why? Why? I'm gonna be the first YouTuber to stuff the guts of an old HomePod into the new one, and stuff the guts of a new HomePod into an old one. Witness me. As soon as those things drop, yeah, I'll go into a little debt to fuck with that. Pardon my language. I have a sailor's mouth. And I am working on it. That's probably not as bad as your kids have probably heard before, so. Alright. So, let's flip this around and get their mesh put back on before we go any further. So we're going to find our power hole here, find the power hole there, line up those power holes and stretch that on. Yeah. Easy peasy. We'll switch our T6 back out for the T5 and screw that back down. Alright, and then we can take our rubber foot and make sure we get any of that extra fuzz out of there, so that when we stick this on, it's got a nice full contact patch with that original adhesive. And then flip that back around. Let's cut, looks like a little straggler. Let's get that trimmed. There we go. Stringy be gone. Because these are the drawstrings we care about. Alright, so let's grab those rubber covers for the screws and put those back on. Alright. Let's pull that up. Get our logic board put back in. Remember, has to go in at an angle before we can get it fully inserted and locked in. Then we can grab our frame, start working that back together. And remember, no smoking and no flash photography. Alright. Switch our T5 back out for the T6. We're going to loosely screw this frame down. We want to keep it loose enough so that we can still feed that mesh into the lip around it. Once we get that all tightened up, then we can tighten the screws for this frame, but we want to leave them loose until we get the mesh tightened up first. So just 2 or 3 turns for each of those screws, and then we can grab the drawstrings and pull those up while sort of pulling the mesh and assisting it into that lip on this frame here. There we go, and for good measure we can pull those in opposite directions to tighten this mesh up a little bit. And then I'm going to go around and push this frame down, keep holding it down, and tighten those screws. Once you get 2 of those adjacent, or should I say opposite, once you get at least 2 opposite screws tightened down, you can let go and tighten the other 2. But okay, we are nearing the completion of this specific HomePod. We're going to screw these drawstrings back together, and for that it's pretty easy. We're going to start that screw with the string halfway underneath and then wrap it around, tighten that screw. You don't want to over tighten these drawstring screws. All these screws do is hold the drawstring. It's very easy to strip the threads that these screw into, so just get it tight enough to hold your drawstring, and then you can wrap them around the posts. So if the original HomePods were manufactured like towards the end of what, 2017? Really? I can't remember. But what I would do is I would look at how long it I would find out what the earliest production date was for the original HomePods, and then find what the release date was, and then take the difference of that time and estimate use that to estimate probably when Apple's going to start manufacturing the new units. These new rumored ones. But if I recall correctly, there were HomePods being manufactured as early as late 2017, and if I'm not mistaken, they were announced in like mid-2018? I can't remember. So, upwards of like 6 months, it seems, 6 to 10 months ahead of time that they start manufacturing them. But I could be completely mistaken. Don't quote me on any of that. Do your own research. Alright. So we can get that display here. Reconnect that. grab its last 4 T6 Torx screws, and then we can do a quick sound test on this guy. We'll factory reset it, and actually no, that's gonna take too long to factory reset it and set it up on my phone and pair it and all that jazz. So we'll get this one buttoned up, and we'll just we'll do the sanity checks. We'll check that it turns on, produces sound, and the volume buttons are lighting up nice and even, and then we'll move on to our second HomePod. Alright. I see quite a few new people that have joined the stream, so just to catch you guys up, we are just wrapping up this repair. It had dirty bass, and originally I suspected the classic DC offset, those capacitors on the amplifier going bad, but as it turns out, once we got the mesh off, there was a fat nasty crack in the shell, a really big one. And so we went ahead and tore this down the rest of the way. Went ahead regardless, and we replaced the power diode, replaced the capacitors on the amplifier, and started buttoning it back up in a replacement shell, because there's no coming back from that. And they also had some of their internal gaskets were cracked, and I'm not going to trust this if this was broken, so we just replaced all of that. But amplifier has been refurbished, new shell, and now it's time to put the display on and find out if we messed up anything. And while you're here, why not vote on my poll? Is this a poll? Yes or no? Let me know. Vote on the poll. Show me that you're paying attention. Positive to positive. As we lower it, we're lining up the negative. As best as we can. And then before we push that down, we're just going to come from the top and double check that that's centered before we commit. All right. Let's get this connected to power and see if we're all fixed up. Of course, after the stream today, I'll go ahead and factory reset this and do some thorough sound testing just to make sure that there's no issues with playing heavy bassy music through it after a few minutes, just to be sure. But for the sake of the stream and time and what have you, we will just go ahead and see. Haha, we've got power. So we'll let that finish booting up, and then we'll test to see if it produces sound, of course, and that our volume buttons light up nice and even. Well, that was a hefty thunk. What was that? So our pod is booted up. Let's go ahead and wake it up.
I'm having trouble connecting to the internet.
Yep. No, I didn't hear any popping when it woke up, and the bass is certainly there. Let's see if we can get the volume buttons up, and yes, those look nice and evenly illuminated. So looks like I've got a couple of packages. Let me go grab those. Well, that loud thud that I commented on just a few seconds ago turned out to be my packages from USPS. So, much appreciated, USPS. And it looks like, oh, nice! We got 2 more HomePods. These ones I bought for myself to harvest parts from. But we've got 2 more HomePods here to mess with. So, alright. This one's all good to go. Yeah, sound.
There's a problem with the
volume.
There's a problem with the
Sound and bass, sound and volume, and HomePod goodness. Let's unplug that from power. Set it onto the side. And we will open up our second HomePod for repair here today. This one comes to us from, well, no, let me, hold on. Let me check my email really quick because the name on the box was not the same as who had sent it, I believe. Yes, so we've got John's HomePod here. And theirs has no power. So let me open this real quick. I don't want to show their address on camera, obviously. All right. Oh, I dig the painter's tape. That makes it easy to take off. Go ahead and try to save that. I'm out of painter's tape, otherwise I would do the same. If you're shipping your HomePod and you happen to have the original box, it's going to be some of the best packaging that you can get to safely transport your HomePod or ship it. And you're going to want to do exactly what they did here, which is tape the bottom to the box so that way it doesn't come apart in transit and result in the HomePod sitting on its power cable, which can again leave imprints in the mesh. So what can happen, of course, if the box opens too much, this cable starts to unravel and peek out like this, and your HomePod will be sitting on that. And depending on how it gets shipped, it will almost certainly start to leave marks and dents and imprints in your mesh. So always a good idea to make sure your cable's properly wrapped and coiled up in this little cavity here, and that you tape your box together so it doesn't come apart in transit and cause more damage than you've already got, right? So that is a beautiful shot right there in the on that side angle camera there, if I do say so myself. But this one supposedly has no power, so let's get it connected to the watt meter and take a look for ourselves. So we got a nice loud spark from that. That's totally normal. But we've got nothing. About 4 watts from the wall. Pretty typical of a shorted diode on the amplifier board. So same as the last one here. Let's go ahead and start tearing it apart. Get this guy on fixed up. So we're going to start by getting that pry tool under that under our display here, or should I say touch cover. This first part that we're prying off here is a purely passive component. It doesn't have any active function in the HomePod. All it does is sit there and look pretty. That's its sole purpose. So we're going to pry that top cover off. Then we can get our T6 screwdriver, of course. Start taking those screws out for the display. and then we're going to get that display pried up. Very important that we get under both of those layers, not just the plastic, but the plastic and that PCB. Relinquish your goods. Give me the stuff. Yes. Yes. Interesting. You see that, right? Somebody wrote the letter A on this. This HomePod's not been apart before, as best as I can tell, and I think I can tell pretty well. This has not been taken apart before. And the letter A is written on the underneath of that display. I've never seen that before. The part number's the same, right? 174123. No, this is an earlier display, 173242. Oh, that could also be the serial number. Who knows? Interesting. Yes, quite. Undo those drawstrings. Doodle-doodle-doo. Doodle-doo. Oh, uh-oh. Come on. Get that frame out of the way. Get that logic board out of the way. And then get our base. Let's readjust our cameras here so we can get a nice good view of that there. Pull that mesh on down. Nice. Nice. Alright, it's time to break out the big fat flathead and commence the pry. The pry! 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 Oh, 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 oh. Dun 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 dun. Not wanting to give up, are ya? Well, I've got something for ya. This one's playing tough guy, and I ain't in the mood for it. You will be demolished. You will lose. Alright, can we pull this apart by hand now? Come on. God. I'm breaking a sweat. I need a break after that. We've got 4 people that think this is a poll and 1 person that thinks this is not a poll. Interesting results so far. Let's see how that pans out. My goodness, that was... All right. Let's get that woofer on out of here. Oh, excuse me for what's about to come. Excuse me. Wow. All right, well, let's check that woofer really quick here. Feels good. Looks good. Smells great. Woofer is in good condition. Love to see it, because I don't have enough of those to replace them. Actually, I just got those 2 HomePods that I bought for myself in today, so I do have some parts now. getting expensive. Broken HomePods are getting too expensive for me to afford anymore. People are asking like $150 to $200 for a broken one, and then you turn around and try to sell a working one and people haggle you down to $200, $150, and it's like, come on. Get out of here. Power supply. That supplies the power. Not anymore. We can go ahead and take away that side angle now.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Pardon. I firmly believe that you should not restrict your natural bodily functions like that. Like, if you got a belch coming, you got a fart coming, and you need to let it out, don't hold it in. But don't be rude about it either. Use your manners. That's my dream society. Oh God. Maybe it's not. Just a bunch of people farting and burping all the time. In public. I guess they already do that. Not everybody uses their manners, though. I don't even see people covering their coughs, so no hope in that. But enough about me being crazy. Let's get this amplifier out. Maybe if you subscribe to my channel and tune in to some more live streams, you'll catch more of my craziness. And I'm only gonna get crazier from here. I've got a stack of just amplifier boards that I've built up over time as I've replaced other people's amplifier boards that I need to go through. One day, maybe I'll set up a live stream one day where I just do nothing but repair my stack of amplifier boards. Goodness. Alright, so we've got that amplifier out of the shell. We're going to set those extra parts to the side. We're going to switch over to our up-close camera so we can take a look at what I'm talking about. So, if you're just joining or you didn't catch it, this HomePod has no power, no signs of life. And we've got the amplifier board here, and this is the most common culprit for this no power issue, is this diode right here. And so what we're going to do is grab our multimeter. We're going to disconnect that from our woofer there. We're going to get our multimeter turned on. We're going to switch that over into continuity test mode, so it beeps if it detects continuity, or in this case here we're looking to see if this component is shorted. If the component shows continuity through itself, that also means it's shorted. So it doesn't matter whether you put the red or the black on the big pin on the bottom, just put one of your probes on the big pin on the bottom and test through the two big pin or the two little pins on the top. And so if it's good, then if this diode is still good, then we shouldn't hear any beeping from our multimeter. If it's bad, it's going to be shorted and it's going to make our multimeter beep. So yep, already just on that first pin there, it's shorted, and we're just, for posterity, we'll check the other one. And yep, that one's shorted too. So this capacitor, lol, this diode is bad. I bet you if we zoom in on that, the date code on it's going to either say 1746 or 1748K. And that is a big fat 1746K. So let me switch over to the other camera here. And let's go ahead and replace this diode so we can get this amplifier to turn on again. And then that'll be the repairs that they sent it in for. However, before we throw this back together, of course, once we get it powering on, we'll test for DC offset. And if we see any suspicious behavior there, we'll go ahead and replace those filtering capacitors on the back that are responsible for that. But primary focus here is the no power, so let's replace that diode. We got our cheap Amazon hot air station here. We've just got the heat cranked all the way up to 500 degrees Celsius. That's the max. And we've got the airflow up at about 85-80%, somewhere around there. And we're just blasting this diode here until it starts to melt the solder underneath, and we can then push it away. Alright, we're just going to push that straight down so we can avoid bumping anything else. And there we go. Easy peasy. So now, let's grab ourselves a fresh spanking new diode. We're going to slap some flux onto that diode here so that we can put some solder down on those pads on it. It gives us a nicer, better quality solder joints there when we put it on the board, instead of just putting it on raw, naked, and relying on the solder that's still on those pads. We're going to put some fresh solder on that. There's a million ways you can go about replacing a component on a board. You can clean the pads on the board and flux them up and retin them with fresh solder. You can just say screw it and do none of that. I'm a little bit in between, and it also kind of depends for me on time and convenience, right? Like, it's easy for me to retin this diode here, but there's more risk than reward involved in me getting my wick on there and cleaning the old solder off and putting new solder on there. There's a lot of stuff around there. So the risk versus reward factor for me retinning the pads on the board for this part, just not worth it to me. But I don't have a problem retinning the replacement component, because that's easy and low risk. Whereas these capacitors on the back side here, when I replace these, I actually do the opposite. I pull the old caps off, and I actually retin. I apply new solder to the pads on the board, but I don't tin the capacitors when I put those on, just because it'd be pretty finicky to sit there and try to flux those and put solder on them. I just plop them on with new solder already on the pads on the board. And yeah, so to each their own. You do whatever you feel most comfortable with and what you feel works best. You could debate all day as to what best practices are, but at the end of the day, whatever works for you and works for you reliably, go for it. Alright, we got that on there, so we're going to grab our heat. We're going to put that back down. When we see the solder starting to melt, we can carefully push down on that, give it a few more seconds of heat. While we're continuing to hold it down, we'll pull the heat away. Wait for that solder to solidify like that. You saw it change, like the texture of it changed from really smooth to kind of this like dull look here. That's when it's hardened and solidified, so we can let go. And then we shall now, first of all, let's get some of that extra flux off the board. And then let's go ahead and, well, let's let this cool down for a sec here. Okay. So before we throw this back together and call it good, we're going to throw this together on the bench here. And when I say we're going to throw this together on the bench, what I mean by that pretty much is just we're not putting all these parts together inside of the shell of the HomePod. We're just going to throw together with spare parts just to get the amplifier turned on and producing sound so that we can take some measurements. Of course, see if our no power repair worked, but also now that we've got power for this, we want to see if there's any DC offset problems that have been hiding and sneaking up on them. So let's just get a power supply on there. Let's get our old diode here thrown off so we don't short out on that. And then we'll grab ourselves a logic board cable that we've pulled from another HomePod. And if you haven't figured it out by now, having a whole set of parts, like a whole set of spare parts, goes a long way for testing your HomePods and your HomePod repairs. If you're just doing one or two repairs, I probably wouldn't suggest getting a HomePod just to have the parts for making testing these sort of things easier, right? Because you gotta peel this logic cable out and unscrew a few things, and it's not the easiest thing in the world. It's totally doable, but it is a hassle. So if you're only fixing one or two HomePods, you can just throw the thing back together all the way and do your tests. But if you're fixing HomePods regularly, I suggest buying a pod that you can use just for parts and take all of the parts out, so that way you can do what I'm doing here. You can connect all the parts with them exposed, so you can more easily test and take it back apart in case you missed something and what have you. So anyways, I've got another logic board here that's also attached to a display that I've already pre-configured, so we'll get that connected. And then we've got a subwoofer here that I've got on an extra long cable, so we're going to plug that in. And I've actually got wires soldered directly into the subwoofer, so I can more easily probe the amount of DC that's being sent to the subwoofer. So DC is you don't want DC on your subwoofer. So we're gonna check and see if there's two common issues for HomePods. You've got no power and you've got the DC offset. So obviously the no power one, that's an obvious one. Your HomePod stops powering on, and that's you can't miss that. But the DC offset problem, that one can sneak up on you. It can have varying symptoms across the board. So we may as well test this for that DC offset, even if the user, or even if, I guess I should call them the customer, I'm not used to that, but even if the customer didn't complain about any DC offset symptoms, they just sent it in for no power repair, we're gonna be thorough, and we're going to test for all of the common issues while we have it and while we have it apart. Because the last thing you want to do is fix this for no power, charge the guy, send it back to him, and a month or two later he's having death farts. And so now you gotta, it's just, it's one of those risk reward things for me, kinda. I don't know, maybe that's the wrong terminology, but in any case, I like to be thorough and try to do things the right way the first time so I don't have to go back and do it again. So enough rambling. let's get some power connected to this so we can finally check. Of course, we'll want to see if our no power repair worked, that the power's on. But of course that we don't have any DC offset to fix up before we throw this back together. So, plugged into power. Drum roll, please. We've got power. So we'll let that boot up. Once it boots up, we can wake it up, which turns on the amplifier and will give us a, we'll see how much DC the amplifier produces. So I've said this a million times. I've probably said it a few times during this stream, but I'm going to keep saying it over and over again. DC offset is unwanted DC that goes into your woofer. It's being generated from the amplifier, and it's totally normal and pretty much expected that any amplifier, whether it's from a HomePod or your home theater receiver or anything, usually there's going to be some amount of DC offset. It's inherent, it's inevitable. But what we want to see here is no more than 50 millivolts of DC offset. If we see more than that, or if we see a DC offset number that's gradually increasing, those are both causes, those would both warrant repairing or replacing those capacitors on the back of the amp that cause this issue. If we see under 50 millivolts of DC on the woofer and it's not increasing steadily, then we're good. We just had no power to fix and there's no DC offset to repair. So if I haven't lost you by now, let's see. And we've got a very cool result of just about -1 to about 1 to 2 millivolts of DC offset. So that is a excellent result. Absolutely stellar. So don't need to worry about any DC offset repairs. We don't need to replace the capacitors on the back. Just the no power on this one. No popping when I unplug it from power. We're good to go. So without further ado, doobity-doo, let's get the test parts off of this and put it back together in their shell. And we'll be about done for the day. So just get the power supply out. All right. We can get their shell here back in. I'm gonna pop this amplifier into place. And then now for usually the longest part, the longest step out of any of this, got to put the screws into this amplifier here. There's 14 of them. They all connect to the amplifier to the tweeters underneath, so there's quite a few of them, and you can't miss any of them. I mean, I'm sure just by the physical pressure of the rest of the screws being on that, if you were missing 1 or 2 of these screws, it would probably still work fine. But if you end up losing any of your screws, just let me know. Just shoot me a message, email me, or leave a comment on one of my videos. I'll get you my contact information, and I'll send you whatever screws you need for free. I won't charge you anything if all you need is screws. I've got a lot of them. I mean, a lot. So if you need screws, or if you happen to need to buy a part off me and you want me to throw in any screws for you, just let me know. I've got plenty. I won't charge you for screws. anything that I can do to help encourage people to fix their own stuff and get into the world of fixing things for other people, I'm more than happy to help. Ooh, I'm getting a phone call from Spam Risk.
Family Rewards Program, your membership was drawn to receive a complimentary stay. For further details, press 1 now. To be placed on the...
Good afternoon, my name is Kevin. Who do I have the pleasure of speaking to?
Hi, my name's Nick.
Mitch?
No, Nick.
Nick, I apologize for fumbling your name. How are you doing today, Nick?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for asking. Now, before I continue, I just need to confirm, are you at least 25 years of age?
No, I'm not. I lied. I am. I love how they just hung up. I wonder why they care if you're at least 25. I mean, that was a spam call. If you didn't gather by the time I answered that was a spam call. But they didn't feel like talking to anybody under the age of 25. Not that I'm under the age of 25. Not that it really matters. But once they knew they weren't talking to once they thought they weren't talking to someone over 25, they were like, nah, peace. And I think I know why. They probably know that on average, someone under the age of 25 is going to recognize a scam much more easily than somebody over the age of 25. And by that, I don't mean like compared to someone who's 26 or 30 or 35 or maybe even 40. I'm talking they're probably trying to weed out and find like more elderly people, which is really sad. I was hoping that they were going to play along a little more than just hanging up as soon as I gave them the wrong answer the first time. But no worries. It won't be the first time we get a spam call during a live stream, and it won't be the last one that we take on a live stream. I would love to get into the whole scam baiting side of things. That'd be a nice little addition to my channel. But a lot of the times I tend to give them the checkmate too early, and they catch on and hang up. So I'm not very good at scam baiting, but I forgot the power supply. Let's just wiggle that on in there real quick. Alright. Screw the power supply in. Can you imagine if we threw this thing all the way back together without the power supply in it? And then, all because I was dicking around with a scam call? Stupid scammers. It's all their fault. Nah, it's not a big deal. I would have taken it back apart and put it in there, no problem. Easy peasy. But it would have been funny. Okay, power supply is put back in. Got the ribbon cable connected to the logic board. Let's put our subwoofer in now. Awesome. And then we'll screw that down. Let's get that side angle back up. There we go. Looking good. Subwoofer is in. Let's get the basket put back now. Let's get some of that extra. I know that's going to mess with it sitting flush, so we're just going to peel that off. All right. And that does not want to go back on, does it? Is this messed up? Let's try a different one. I got lots of these things. No, this one doesn't want to sit down either. What do we got going on here? No, I see. Let's see, does that sit down now? No. Did we mess this up? Let's see, let's take the woofer back out, because this is not sitting down. Yeah, I think I didn't, don't think I put this bottom plastic ring in correctly. Let's find out. Because it's sitting too high. This whole plastic ring here is sitting too high. I think I didn't put this plastic ring in the bottom right. Let's find out. Let's get this off. And if this just pulls right out, then yeah, I messed this one up, then yeah, so it should just come out like that. To put this in correctly, line up the notch on the inside with the logic cable and set that down. And then this is what I forgot to do. Turn it counterclockwise, 90 degrees, until it settles down, until it steps down, and then twist it back clockwise until the notch realigns with the logic cable. And that is what I forgot to do when we were throwing this back together. Stupid spammers and scammers distracting me from my repairs. There we go. So now this plastic ring is sitting much lower, and this looks more correct. So that's probably what we messed up, but easily correctable. There we go. Easy peasy. Don't want to forget that grommet to this guy. We are just off our game today, aren't we? Well, I'd rather make a bunch of easily correctable mistakes that I catch and fix before I send it back than make any sort of mistake before sending it back to them uncorrected. And plus it gives an opportunity for us all to see exactly what certain mistakes may look like, so you can more easily identify them. And now I know. I never knew what this would be like if you didn't put that bottom plastic ring in incorrectly, but now we know. It causes the whole subwoofer and plastic rings here to sit up too high, which keeps this from sitting down low enough to be flush with the shell, which would inevitably cause issues. So, good to know. Is this a poll? Is this a poll? 6 votes, and 5 of them think that this is a poll, and 1 person thinks that this poll is not a poll. So, not sure what to make of those results. I mean, I was pretty certain that the poll was a poll, but somebody seems to disagree. and I'd like to hear their reasoning. Why is this pole not a pole? Is it a sham? All right. Now, will our basket here sit flush? And yes, it will. Look at that. Wonderful. So we can go on now and screw this down. All right, let's get this mesh pulled up, starting to retake its original HomePod shape and form. Putting on those rubber covers for the screws here, and then we can pull that mesh up tight, get the frame and logic board here back in. We'll be on our way. Very good. Let's get these back on here. Alright, we're gonna loosely put these screws for the frame in so we can tighten the mesh up around it. And then get our drawstrings here. Start pulling that mesh back into place. All right. Put on our unique display here with the handwritten A on it. Not sure where that came from, but interesting to see it. All right. And last but certainly not least, let's get this display put on there. Or sorry, this touch cover. And we will be all done for today. All right. Let's give her a test, shall we? Look at that. You can't even tell it's been taken apart. Beautiful. Let's plug this bad boy up to power or girl. Not sure. Drum roll, please. Voila! We've got power. Let's see if we've got sound, and the volume buttons line up and light up nice and even. And
I'm having trouble connecting
we've
to
got
the internet.
sound, and I can
For more
hear the
info,
bass.
Check the home app. I'm having trouble
And our volume buttons, yeah, they light up nice and even. So we've got both pods fixed up today. First one here was a rather unique case of some pretty gnarly physical damage. Second one here, just the case of a usual no power caused by the shorted diode. Easy fixes. And yeah, that's all I've got for you guys today. So if you enjoyed the live stream and you're not yet subscribed, please go and subscribe. Helps make me feel better about what I do here. And I'll catch you guys in the next live stream repair. Goodbye.